And the medical component, the medical considerations, become extremely important, perhaps paramount to such a trip. The Apollo 11 mission would forever be one of man's biggest achievements. Some viewers may remember it as the mission where we successfully sent man to the moon. The Apollo 11 mission saw Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as brave men who made history by being the first individuals to walk on the moon. However, there was one more astronaut who was on that mission. The astronaut is not as popular as the first two that were mentioned. This astronaut was named Michael Collins. He remains rather obscure because of the role he played in the mission. Michael Collins has shed light on the spooky secrets the astronauts encountered on their mission to the moon. Why is this astronaut coming out now to talk about the mission? What could they have found or encountered on the moon that is so spooky? Join us in this video as we discuss the spooky secret that Apollo 11 astronaut exposes about their mission to the moon. Everyone remembers Neil Armstrong's iconic statement as he took his first steps on the moon. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. This statement was well chosen considering the situation in which it was uttered and the enormity of the situation. Buzz Aldrin followed Armstrong as the two gentlemen astronauts explored the new terrain. Michael Collins was the third astronaut on the mission. Unfortunately, he could not join them on the walk around the moon. He was required to stay in the moon-orbiting command module. The moon has been a natural wonder for humans for the longest time, a wonder we indulged in figuring out to the fullest and the best of our capacity. Before modern gadgets and telescopes were invented, our ancestors studied the moon with limited equipment. They charted the moon's phases, figured out how long a lunar eclipse took, and associated the moon with various myths and legends. They figured out that the moon controlled the tides and influenced our calendars. Some even believe that the moon can affect mental health. The first missions to the moon were made by sending unmanned probes into orbiters, such as the Soviet Luna and the American Ranger and Surveyor programs. These missions provided useful information about the conditions and geology of the moon. With each discovery about the moon came the desire to send humans to the moon. The need and desire became more intense during the Cold War, when the space race between the United States and the USSR was a thing of national pride and technological superiority. The U.S. launched the Apollo mission in 1961. This mission aimed to send a man to the moon and return him safely by the decade's end. This was a big deal requiring much funding. The Apollo program involved several stages of development and testing. Some of these tests included suborbital and orbital flights, rendezvous and docking maneuvers, lunar orbiting and landing simulations, and extravehicular activities. The pinnacle of the Apollo program was the historic Apollo 11 mission. The Apollo mission took off on July 16, 1969. On July 20, 1969, the world watched in awe as the shuttle descended on the moon's surface. The three-man crew consisted of Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. After reaching a lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin separated from Collins in the lunar module, Eagle, as Collins stayed behind to man the command module. At precisely 2:56 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the world watched with bated breath as Armstrong took the first steps on the moon. Armstrong was followed closely by Aldrin, and both men spent 2 hours gathering samples and performing scientific experiments. After all the activities, the men concluded by planting the American flag on the moon. Both men reconnected with their colleague Collins in the main shuttle to begin their journey back to Earth. Michael Collins had a distinguished career as a test pilot and an astronaut. He was born in Rome, Italy, where his father served. His father was a United States military officer who served as an attaché. Collins grew up a military brat, and as such, moved frequently and lived in several countries during his childhood. He attended St. Albans School in Washington. It was at St. Albans that Collins developed an interest in aviation and astronomy. In 1952, Collins graduated from the military academy at West Point and chose to join the Air Force. He became a fighter pilot and flew missions in the Korean War. Later in his career, Collins attended the Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Here, he tested various aircraft, including fighter jets and bombers. In 1963, NASA selected Michael Collins as one of the third group of astronauts, along with Buzz Aldrin. Collins trained for the Gemini and Apollo programs, which aimed to achieve crewed orbital flights and lunar landings. Collins made his first space flight in 1966 as the pilot of Gemini 10, alongside astronaut John Young. The two astronauts performed 2 rendezvous with other spacecraft, and Collins performed 2 spacewalks. Collins was originally supposed to be on the Apollo 8 mission, but had to be taken off due to surgery he had to undergo. The surgery sidelined him from the Apollo 8 mission, but he was later reassigned to the Apollo 11 mission. I guess it worked out well in the end, because Collins got to be a part of the crew that would land on the moon for the first time, which is a monumental feat. Collins was the command module pilot, a role that may or may not have relegated him to the background. This does not, however, make him any less important than any other person on that mission. Collins's role as pilot was a very important one. As the pilot, he was saddled with the responsibility of guiding and maintaining the command module, Columbia, to serve as a mothership for the mission in the vastness of space. While Armstrong and Aldrin embarked on an exploration of our moon, Collins stayed behind piloting the lunar module. The role was a complex one. Collins was responsible for the docking procedure. The docking procedure meant Collins had to see the successful detaching of the Eagle, carrying Armstrong and Aldrin. An error at this point would have jeopardized the entire mission. After the lunar module departed for the moon's surface, Collins found himself alone in Columbia. This period has always been regarded as one of deep isolation for Collins, but they couldn't be more wrong. Collins had so much to do in those moments. His task list was heavy and consisted of monitoring the systems, maintaining communication lines with mission control, and preparing for critical rendezvous and docking procedures with the lunar module after it was sent from the lunar surface. In fact, without Collins, the mission would not have gone so flawlessly. Collins also played an important role in the Trans-Earth Injection (TI). TI is a critical maneuver that involves firing the spacecraft's engines to leave lunar orbit and set the course back to Earth. Once more, Collins's technical skills and precision were required and were key to the successful execution of this maneuver. Collins was literally the backbone of this entire mission. He represented true sportsmanship and camaraderie, representing the mission's togetherness and humanity, despite being physically separated from his crew and assuming a more behind-the-scenes role. Despite taking the back seat, Collins is a testament to the collaborative and collective effort that defined the Apollo 11 mission from the beginning until the crew landed safely back on Earth. Some people speak about the alone time Collins spent on the spaceship and how it may have likely affected him psychologically. Surely, the mission must have left its mark on him profoundly. But what did he discover about himself and the rest of humanity? What are the things this lone astronaut pondered upon during his alone times on the ship? As the lunar module, which carried his crew members, disengaged from the ship and onto the moon's surface, Collins remained on board to command the ship, as we have previously discussed. Collins's most remarkable experiences were during his solo orbit around the dark side of the moon.